Hi, I'm Linda, and this is No Frills ASMR. I was thinking today of talking about Easter and what leads up to Easter, and just kind of telling you the story of Easter. I'm not a theologian or any, I, I have no expertise. I did grow up in the Episcopal Church. I was an acolyte for a lot of years, which is like a young person who carries the cross up and helps with the communion part of the church, which we'll talk about if you don't know what that is. But anyway, I just thought I'd tell you the basics. And please don't get mad at me if I have things wrong or not the way you want it told. Even within the Christian church, there are different versions of the Bible. There's like the King James Version, and there are all these different versions. And the New Testament is, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John all have their own ways of telling the story that are different from each other. So depending on which one you're looking at, you might get a little different version of the story. But I'll just tell you the basics as I know them. And, it'll give you something, a jumping off point, let's say. Hold on, I have to have a little sip of tea. My cold has gone away, but I still have a little bit of a dry throat, cough kind of thing going on. But don't worry, I don't think it's anything to worry about. All right. I don't know. I was thinking of writing right on here, but this might be a little bit tricky. But we're going to start our week off on Palm. Oh, gosh, it's too small, isn't it? Hold on. Switching. Change of plans. Sorry. Change of plans. Let's use this. That's kind of Eastery looking, isn't it? Sorry. All right. We'll start the week on Palm Sunday. And hold on, now I'm looking for another Sharpie because the Sharpie's not so great. I tell you what, things are falling apart. Okay. Anyway, Palm Sunday. We'll have to backtrack just a little bit that before Palm Sunday, Jesus has gone off into the desert for 40 days and 40 nights. He sacrifices. There's a song that many of you might know that goes like that. And he fasts and he prays and he just, spends 40 days really thinking about his relationship to God. And towards the end of it, while he's starving, a tempter, some would say the devil, Satan, comes to him and says, "If you are the Son of God, command these stones turn to bread." And Jesus is like, I don't do magic tricks. No, I don't really know. I don't remember what happens there. I just know that happens. And then Jesus ignores the tempter. He doesn't deal with that, I think. I guess I should look that part up. Somebody in the comment. But then he goes into the city of Galilee. And when he comes into Galilee, the people there are like, "This is the King of the Jews." And they take palms and they lay palms down for him to walk on. And they're all, excited to see him. Well, the Roman king, or I don't know if he was the emperor king, I can't recall exactly, but the people in command in Rome hear about Jesus and all these people praising him like that. And they're like, "No, we're the king. Who's this guy? We got to get this guy." So that piques their interest in Jesus. And so during that week, I think it's actually on Wednesday, they say, of that week. And some people call that, I think they call it Sin Wednesday. Oh my gosh, why can't I ever spell Wednesday? Oh no, that doesn't look right. Oh well, whatever. You know what I mean. And that is when Jesus has 12 disciples. And the disciples just means people who are like students of Jesus, friends of Jesus. They've learned from him. Some of them, like Simon Peter, has been there since the very beginning. And some of them kind of came along later on. But they helped spread the word of Jesus. Well, one of them, his name's Judas. Judas Iscariot goes to the Romans and says, "What will you pay me to betray him?" And the Romans tell him 30, I think they say 30 pieces of silver. And so Judas is like, okay, interesting. So then on Thursday, Jesus tells all the disciples to come meet him for dinner, and that later became known as the Last Supper. Obviously not called that then because they didn't know yet. But if you've ever seen the paintings by, hold on, I brought this here, but it's kind of too hard to see. This is by Da Vinci. But this is a Warhol version of it that my son had. And this is the Last Supper. I wish I had a version that you could see better. But Jesus has all the disciples come to the Last Supper. And there is sometimes some talk and disagreement over whether this figure right here is a female and might actually be Mary Magdalene, who was Jesus's very close friend. But I don't know. And during the Last Supper, he, I'm sorry, I'm blanking right now. Well, anyway, he talks to everybody and kind of informs them that the end is near. And he says that Peter will, he predicts that Peter will deny his knowledge of Jesus, that he'll deny knowing him. And he says, you'll deny it 3 times before the rooster crows. And Peter's like, no, I would never do that. You know, you're my, and Peter's, this Simon Peter, same person, Peter. And so he's like, I've been with you since day one. I would never do that. And Jesus also says he has bread and wine on the table. And at this point is where he says, this bread is my body and the wine is my blood. And that has become central to the Eucharist, also known as Holy Communion. And so in the Episcopal Church, now I assume this is true of other churches, but I don't know because I haven't been to a whole lot of churches, to be honest. But every Sunday they have communion, and the priest holds up bread, and they usually have unleavened bread. And they say, this is my body, which is given to you. Do this for the remembrance of me. And then they hold up the wine. This is my blood, which is given to you. Do this for remembrance of me. So, and sometime when I go to the Episcopal Church with my parents, I will try to, they give you a bulletin that has everything that happens at the church. And so maybe, and I mean during the service, I could show that to you sometime and go over it because it's the same every week. It's kind of interesting. Okay, so this all happens at the Last Supper. And what's interesting about the painting, and I wish we could see it better, but there's a lot of symbolism within this painting. And it's too dark here to see. I wish it was better, but you can see Judas. This is the moment. This painting is supposed to show the moment when Jesus tells them that he will be betrayed. And they're all shocked and saying, how could he say this kind of thing, And you can't see it here, but Judas is holding a purse, which they think is the 30 silver pieces. And then Peter is behind Judas, and he's holding a knife. So a lot of symbolism. There's a lot of other symbolism. If you're ever curious, it's interesting to read. And I do think it's why it's important to know Bible stories, New Testament, even if you aren't Christian, because so much artwork and theater and movies and language has ties, symbolism, whatever, in the Bible. And we'll talk about some of that. Okay, sorry. All right, so that's the Last Supper. So let me think. Okay, so then after supper, Jesus goes to a garden, I believe, to pray. And the garden, and this is kind of something that comes up, I feel like, in art, is called I believe you say Gethsemane. Gethsemane. So he goes to this garden, and then Judas shows up in the garden, and he comes up to Jesus, and he kisses him on the cheek. And apparently Jesus looks at him and says, "Do what you are here to do." And Judas kisses him on the cheek and calls him master. And that is a cue to the Roman army or Roman soldiers that are there that is Jesus. And so they arrest him. And that is an important moment. So then he is arrested and tried. And the trial is by a Roman who is the governor of the Jews, because at that time Rome was Jewish, mostly, as I understand it. So that person who runs the trial is, I hope I spell this right, Pontius Pilate. And Pontius Pilate questions Jesus. And eventually he says, I don't think this man is guilty of anything. We need to set him free. But the people of the town have now gotten kind of told by Rome that, no, this guy is bad. He's pretending to be a king. He is, not, honest, whatever about it. He's a fake Messiah. What's the word I'm looking for? Yeah, like a fake Messiah. So the people are like, no, he's guilty. And they say, crucify him, crucify him. And so Pontius Pilate, who has said he doesn't believe he's guilty, washes his hands and says, I give him over to you. And that is where the saying, I wash my hands of this, comes from. Pontius Pilate. So now Jesus has been accused of being a false Messiah. He has been arrested, tried, and now he is to be crucified. And so the Roman soldiers make a ring of thorns they take a thorn bush and make what can only a torturous device. That is a crown of thorns. And they put that on his head. And so he has a crown of thorns on his head. And they give him the cross that they will crucify him on to carry, to drag behind him as they climb up the hill of Calvary. And the people in the crowd scream, "Hail, King of the Jews." And that is where the term cross to bear comes from. So we have wash my hands of it. Cross to bear. A crown of thorns, which is sometimes used. Crown of. No. Spelling isn't my specialty. So they take him up Calvary, which is also known as Golgotha, which I think is sometimes used in literature. So he is hung on the cross between two other criminals who are robbers and whatever. And there's some stories with that. But if you are ever on a road trip in the United States, oftentimes you'll see 3 crosses on the side of the road. And they are known as the coffin daffer crosses. Sorry, and I've done a video about those. So Jesus is hung on the cross at Golgotha or Calvary, and it's not a quick death to be crucified. It's a terrible death. They put stakes in your hands and hang you in your feet. And during that time, he is said to, and it depends on which story you're reading in the New Testament, but he is said to have said, my God, why hast thou forsaken me?" Except in a different language. And that is sometimes questioned, like, was he having a crisis of faith, whatever. But I did actually look that up, and this is not my Bible. It was in my house, but I don't know where it came from because I've never had a King James version. But anyway, I looked up. It is from Psalm 22, and the Psalms are part of the Old Testament, and it's kind of the most beautiful part of the Bible, maybe. I don't know, maybe but it's mostly like songs. Psalms are kind of songs, sort of poems. And a lot of them are really pretty. But in Psalm 22, it says, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? Why art thou so far from helping me and from the words of my roaring?" So some think that he said that because he was singing, or knew that psalm. Or maybe one of the people who wrote the New Testament put that there. Don't know. But then he was also, Jesus also said, "Father, forgive them. They know not what they do." So then Jesus, who is, I think that during while he was dying on the cross, his mother Mary Magdalene, oh my gosh, the one, I'm sorry, I can't remember, but one of his disciples stuck with him the whole time. But then when they took him down, they put him in a tomb that was like a cave, as I recall. Whoops, wrong pen. And I think they did this because they thought his body might be tampered with. And so they put his body inside this cave, and then they moved a huge rock in front of the cave. Now, that was on Friday, Good Friday. Oops, I forgot to write that. That is known as Good Friday. So Good Friday is the day that Jesus was crucified and died. And then Mary Magdalene, who was his very good friend, goes to the grave. And upon arriving, she sees that the stone has been moved. And I think at first she thought, oh no, someone has tampered with Jesus. And then the body was not there. And then I think it was 2 or 3 angels show up and they explain to her what's happened. And then Jesus shows up and he says, I've risen from the dead, and go tell the disciples. And now this part I'm having a little trouble remembering, but okay, so that is on Easter Sunday, by the way. So on Easter Sunday, Jesus has risen from the dead. And she goes to tell the disciples. Now, my recollection is that they don't believe her at first. And then Jesus shows up at a place where they all are and kind of says, you should believe it. I told you all along this was going to happen. You should believe it. And so they have to see him to believe. And he says, if you really had faith, you'd believe without seeing. And so he kind of was like, hey, you should have believed Mary when she told you. And that is sort of one of the cornerstones of faith, is a belief without seeing. I think that's right. So anyway, then he, after that, goes to heaven. And that is what makes it so that any Christian can go to heaven. And one of the cornerstones of Christian faith is that while a lot of people say, how could Judas have betrayed him? Oh, I forgot. Oh my gosh, I forgot something. I forgot about Peter. So he had told Peter, you're going to deny me 3 times. Now, Peter's an old school friend. They've known each other forever. But when the Roman soldiers had him, they asked Peter, do you know this man? And Peter said, no, I don't know him. And then they asked him again, do you know this man? He said, no. And then the 3rd time they said, do you know this man? And Peter said no. And then the rooster goes, and Peter realizes that he has done exactly what Jesus said he'd do. And he breaks down in tears. And he is so repentant. And there are a lot of paintings showing that moment, the repentance of Peter. Anyway, that all happened. So then, now I'm going to have to look this up because I'm not sure, but I think where doubting Thomas comes from is that one of the disciples is Thomas, and he doesn't believe that Jesus has risen from the dead until he sees him. And Jesus kind of says, like, you shouldn't doubt. Is that where it comes from? Hold on. Let me double check that. Doubting Thomas, page 26. Okay, hold on. 26. Where? Do you guys see it? I don't see it. Did I look at that wrong? Oh, man, I swallowed really hard. Sorry about that. Shoot. I don't know. Doubting Thomas 26. What? Is it? That's funny. It's really 25 because look, it's here. Okay. Thomas, the doubting apostle, an apostle who first doubted the resurrection of Jesus and then believed. He was not present when Jesus appeared to the disciples. Okay, so he had appeared to them all, and then they all went to Thomas and said, yeah, he was resurrected. Okay. When Jesus appeared to the disciples the evening after his resurrection, Thomas rejected their story and insisted that he would not believe until he had seen Jesus with his own eyes and touched Jesus' wounds with his own hands. A week later, Jesus appeared again when Thomas was with the group. He invited Thomas to touch his wounds and believe. Thomas then confessed his faith, saying, "My Lord and my God." Jesus replied, "Thomas, because thou hast seen me, thou hast believed. Blessed are they that have not seen and yet have believed." So you can see how that is a, kind of a cornerstone of faith, that you can believe without seeing. A doubting Thomas is someone who demands evidence to be convinced of anything, especially when the demand is out of place. Okay, so that's doubting Thomas. I knew that had to do with it. I just couldn't remember exactly. But the idea that Thomas and Judas and Simon Peter, they all kind of didn't stand by Jesus the way that maybe they should have, is sort of how Jesus is saying, or Christianity, that Jesus died for all of our sins. Every person is involved in the suffering and death of Jesus. So you can't blame any one of them for their misdoings. That is actually the truth of humans, that you will sin. And every Sunday in church, you say, I'm having a, basically you say you've sinned and ask for forgiveness over and over. That's sort of just a thing with Christian church. Yeah, so there we go. I think that's the story. And then later, I won't try to tell you the rest of the story because I'm not as clear on that. But a lot of why I know this story so well, I'll have to admit, I had the LP of Godspell. I'm sure I saw the movie, but I don't really remember the movie. But the LP had all the words on the inside, all the lyrics. And I absolutely loved it. And there is a song on here. Which one is it? By My Side. You guys go listen to the Godspell version from the movie soundtrack of By My Side. It's a beautiful song. And there's a moment where Jesus talks about Judas betraying him. Whew, it'll give you chills. It'll give you chills. But then if you tour around Italy or Europe, there's so much artwork that you kind of need to know the story of Easter to understand the artwork a lot of times. So it is good to know, I think. And while Christmas is the holiday that most people celebrate, really Easter is the most important Christian holiday, because that is when Jesus died. He rose again. And that is what it makes it so Christians can go to heaven. So it is like the difference between other religions and Christianity. Does that seem correct? I think so. So, I don't know. Do I have anything else to say about that? Let's see real quick if the Last Supper painting is in here, actually. Yeah, I had a Bible that was given to me at my confirmation, and I loaned it to my son when he went to college at University of Dayton. It's a Catholic school, and you had to have a Bible, and I don't know what happened to it after that. But that's okay. It's not like I sit around reading it or anything. I'm not thinking straight right now. So, Last Supper 176. No picture of it. The Last Supper, a fresco painted by Leonardo da Vinci, depicting Jesus and his disciples at the moment Jesus announces that one of them has betrayed him. So he's talking about Judas meeting with the Romans the night before, and Judas is holding the 30 silver in a little purse in his hand, if you look at it. The fresco is now so badly damaged that it can no longer be viewed by the public. Is that true? Oh my gosh. This is an old book, so maybe they've repaired it. I don't know. Leonardo was experimenting with techniques of painting a fresco, and this accounts for some of the deterioration. Interesting. Well, there you go. So that's just a quick little rundown. And I'm 1,000,000% positive I have not hit on everything, but a little basic. I wish I'd remembered the Peter part when I was telling it, because that's an important part. Oh, look, here it is. Why didn't it? All right, so it's still too dark to see, but right here, I believe this guy here, that's Judas, and he's holding in his hand a little purse, and so now they think that's probably supposed to be the silver. And then this is Simon Peter, and it's hard to see on here, but he's holding a dagger in his other hand. And I think I feel like, I can't remember all the symbolism. There's a lot. There's a lot, but I don't remember. Because maybe one of these is also Doubting Thomas. But you can see how he has just told them, and they're all reacting like, what? Look at him with his hands up going, what? It's very interesting, I think. The Last Supper, the traditional Passover meal that Jesus ate with the apostles. Passover meal, right. Passover is a whole different one. That's Old Testament. Passover is when, I'm sorry, I'm going on a tangent, but I'm just trying to remember. Passover is the one from the Old Testament where they said the firstborn, what was it? The firstborn would be the new king. Is that right? And then the emperor said to kill the firstborn. No, that's not it. I know what it is. Hold on. We're going to look it up. No, it's that there was going to be the firstborn would die, and you had to put blood on your door, blood of a lamb on your door, and then it would pass over you. Okay, it's all coming back to me. Let's look it up, though. Sorry. I have to know now. Because it's one of those things I do know, I just don't remember. And that's very important to Jewish religion. Passover 20 and 102. Let's see, on 102, what does it say? Passover. Among Jews, the festival commemorating the Exodus, the deliverance of the Israelites from slavery in Egypt. During Passover, unleavened bread called matzah is eaten. In the course of the festival, the story of Exodus is read. Okay, this is all coming back to me. That's an interesting story, right? Because it's where there were locusts and there were just things. And then it was going to be that this something would go and kill all the firstborn, right? Am I right? And so then they put blood on the door so it would pass over. They don't say that there. Anyway, whatever. Okay, we'll do that another day. Right before his death, at this supper, according to the Gospels, Jesus blessed bread and broke it, telling the disciples, "Take, eat, this is my body." He then passed a cup of wine to them, saying, "This is my blood." Yeah, in the Episcopal Church, because that's what I helped with, they say, "This is my body, which is given to you. Do this in remembrance of me." That's what they say. Jesus's words refer to crucifixion he is about to suffer in order to atone for mankind's sins. He told the apostles, "This do in remembrance of me." Okay, just different word. The actions of Jesus at the Last Supper are the basis for the Christian sacrament of Holy Communion or Eucharist, excuse me, in which the faithful partake in bread and wine. The Last Supper is the subject of the famous fresco by Leonardo da Vinci, which depicts Jesus Christ and his apostles seated along one side of a long table. Yep. What else do we have in here? Here's Mary Magdalene. In the Gospels, a woman from whom devils had been driven. She became a follower of Jesus. Yeah. There's a whole thing with Mary that some people say she was, a sex worker, and then some say that's not true. But either way, she was very close with Jesus. And then there was a movie that came out in the 80s. I think it was The Last Temptation of Christ, that, if I remember correctly, and I really don't remember, all of it, but I think it implied that Mary and him were more than friends, and that maybe she had Jesus's baby. Does that sound right to anybody? I don't know. It's a movie. I don't know. That's not in the Bible. Let's see what else is in here. Oh, let's look up if Gethsemane. CTFG. BCD. Oh, there's crucifixion. There he is. The death of Jesus on the cross. After he had been betrayed by Judas Iscariot and arrested, Jesus was condemned by fellow Jews as a false Messiah and turned over to the Roman governor, Pontius Pilate, to be crucified. Pilate found no reason to condemn Jesus. He tried to convince the people that it was absurd to regard Jesus as king of the Jews, and offered to release him. Just a quick side note. When I was in church as a kid, they used to do a passion play, and members of the church were given parts in the play. And we did this year after year. But I remember when I was very young, I can't actually recall if it was my dad or my mom, but one of them played like Pontius Pilate, and one of them was like, I don't know, somebody, but I remember they were saying not nice things about Jesus, and I was so distraught and like worried that like they'd go to hell or something. I just remember being very like, oh no, this doesn't seem good. And I remember them practicing at home their parts because you had to read them. I don't know. Have any of you ever done that? But it was a good way to learn the story. I think that's probably why I know it so much. Let's see. But when the people insisted that Jesus be put to death, Pilate washed his hands to indicate Jesus' faith was no longer his responsibility and turned Jesus over to be crucified. Roman soldiers then placed a crown of thorns on the head of Jesus and mocked him, saying, "Hail, King of the Jews." He was made to carry a wooden cross up the hill of Calvary near Jerusalem, where he was nailed to the cross and was placed between two thieves who were also crucified. Yes, I got all that. Shortly before his death, he said, "Father, forgive them, they know not what they do." After his death, the followers of Jesus placed his body in a tomb. Jesus had told his disciples that he would sacrifice his life so that believers' sins might be forgiven. Christians believed that his death on the cross and his resurrection 3 days later make salvation possible. Having a cross to bear means any painful responsibility that is forced upon one. To wash one's hands of it means to refuse to take responsibility for an action or an event. The disciples, the followers of Jesus who adhered to his teachings and transmitted it to others. The 12 apostles were the disciples closest to Jesus. Oh, okay. So the disciples were a bigger group. The apostles were the 12. So the ones at the Last Supper were the apostles. So in general, a disciple is an active follower of a leader of a movement, religious or otherwise. Doubting Thomas. What else is in here? Exodus. Oh, we have to read that next time. I had that wrong. What else? What is this one? Wait, is this from when he was in the desert? I'm not really sure. It says, "Get thee behind me, Satan." The reply of Jesus when Satan offered him all the kingdoms of the world if Jesus would worship him. Jesus spoke these words on another occasion. He told his disciples that he would have to be killed and then be raised from the dead, and Peter objected that this should not happen. Jesus saw Peter as a tempter, trying to talk him out of doing what he was put on earth to do. He then spoke the same words, "Get thee behind me, Satan," to Peter. Wow, that's rough. Peter's his friend. Here's Golgotha, the ancient name of Calvary. Yeah. The Gospels, the first 4 books of the New Testament, which tell the life story of Jesus and explain the significance of his message. Gospel means good news. In this case, the news of the salvation made possible by the death and resurrection of Jesus. The 4 Gospels are attributed to Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Figuratively, anything that is emphatically true is called the gospel truth. I'm just looking to see if there's anything else that resurrection. The rising of Jesus from the tomb after his death, a central distinctive belief of the Christian faith. The Gospels state that after Jesus was crucified and lay in a tomb between Friday evening and Sunday morning, he rose in body as well as spirit, and appeared alive to his followers. His resurrection is the basis for Christian belief that not only Jesus but all Christians will triumph over death. Christians celebrate the resurrection on Easter Sunday. All right. I guess that's probably about it. Oh, look, 30 pieces of silver. The money Judas Iscariot received for betraying Jesus to the authorities. He later threw the money into the Temple of Jerusalem. Oh, that's right. I didn't tell you this part. Okay, we'll finish. He later threw the money into the Temple of Jerusalem, and the chief priest bought the potter's field with it, to be used as a cemetery for foreigners. I believe that after Jesus was crucified, Judas, feeling so much guilt, I guess he threw the money, I don't remember that, but he hanged himself because of his guilt. This money is referred to as blood money, money received for the life of another human being. Blood money. See, all these terms come from this. This is why it's important to know. 30 pieces of silver is also used proverbially to refer to anything paid or given for a treacherous act. Yeah, that's bad. Let's see if there's anything else. I don't think so. I think that's it. All right. Well, there we go, guys. So you have Palm Sunday. I only learned this was called Sin Wednesday recently. I hadn't actually heard that. The Last Supper Thursday. Now, what I can't remember right now, let's look it up. There is a day that's called Maundy Thursday, and I cannot for the life of me remember what that's about. I mean, I remember it from church, but I don't know if that's that Thursday or is that something else having to do with Lent. And just so you know, on Ash Wednesday, when you see people with ash on their forehead, that is the palms. You go to Palm Sunday, you get a palm, you bring it home, and then before Ash Wednesday, you bring it back to the church, and they make ash out of it, and that's what they use to make the ash on that cross on your forehead on Ash Wednesday. All right, they don't have Maundy Thursday in here. M-A-U. I don't think so. It should be right here. T mausoleum. Nope. All right, somebody, if you know what Maundy Thursday is that this Thursday? I can't remember. Anyway, and then you have Good Friday, and that is when Jesus was crucified, died, and was buried. And then on Easter Sunday, he rose again, or sometime in between there, he rose again in accordance with scriptures. So there you go. All right. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll talk to you soon. What other things did we learn? We learned wash my hands of it, cross to bear, blood money was one of that was the doubting Thomas was because even after the apostles said they saw him, Thomas still didn't believe until he saw him with his own and put his hands